From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Brazilians are lining up outside polling stations across the country to take part in today's highly contested general elections. Nearly 150 million citizens are eligible to vote. The front-runners in the race are far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro and the Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad. Polls are set to close at 5:30 p.m. local time. And far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro has just voted in Rio de Janeiro. After casting his ballot, Bolsonaro spoke about his health after being stabbed at a campaign rally in early September. He said he cannot longer take part in public events or debates like he did before. We now go live to our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian Muir. Hi Brian, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us what the scene is outside polling stations?
Hi, Jose Daniel. I'm out in front of a polling station in the working class neighborhood of Jaraguá on the north side of Sao Paulo. And after an initial flurry of people lining up to get into the public school building where voting is taking place, it's now kind of a trickle. But it's expected to people are expected to keep coming in like this all day long. Voter turnout is not that serious of an issue in Brazil, as it is legally required. People who don't vote are required to pay a $1 fine, but they have the right to cast a blank ballot. So there's an expectation that only about 10 to 12% of the Brazilian population will not vote. And this is important because in order to win in the first round, the candidate has to have 50% plus one vote of the valid votes of the people who voted. So the way the projections are going right now, it appears that the election is going to a second round. Now, as you've mentioned, Jair Bolsonaro voted, and he made a very misleading statement about not being able to participate in debates because of his health. Now, on the night of the last presidential debates, Thursday night, he was in good enough health to give a long and technically illegal interview to a rival television station. And he's out and about. He's doing live Facebook casts with his fans. And so it seems like it's just an excuse for him not to debate, because he quit debating before the knife injury, and the reason was because he's a very poor debater. He's not a very good speaker. So he prefers to communicate with his followers through a controlled message. And it's usually hate messages spread through social media applications like WhatsApp, where he has thousands of WhatsApp groups with 256 people each in them, and just bombarding them daily with hate messages.
Brian,
okay, so, yes.
Sorry. Do you know when and where Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad is going to vote?
Yes, Fernando Haddad had breakfast this morning in the ABC Metallurgical Workers Union headquarters in São Bernardo with union members. Now, this is Lula's former union, and it's the building where he hid out. I wouldn't say hid out. It's where he pulled himself up when the federal police were threatening to arrest him last April, where the building was surrounded by 20 or 30,000 social movement and labor union members. So he's having breakfast with union members, and he's expected to vote in Sao Paulo shortly. And third place candidate Ciro Gomes is expected to vote in his hometown of Fortaleza, the capital of Ceará, where he served as governor in the early 90s.
And how long do you think it will be until we start getting some results?
Well, Brazil has a computerized voting system, so it's much faster than, for example, the United States. We're expected to have a result by the end of the night tonight. And the projections are that, for now at least, that neo-fascist candidate Jair Bolsonaro will win, and that Fernando Haddad will come in second, and that there'll be a runoff later this month between the two candidates.
Thank you for talking to us, Brian. We'll get back to you pretty soon.
Thank you.
That was our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian Meir. Jailed former president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, sent a message to the people on Saturday, hours ahead of the elections.
Queridas companheiras e queridos companheiros.
Dear comrades, it is important that you go to vote due to several reasons. I am not going to mention the hunt against myself because I am used to it since I started the labor movement. I want to talk with you, with your heart and your soul. I think we have to defend the legacy of the Workers' Party, which has done more than anyone for social policies in the country. This country needs you like never before. And now people have to rise. There might be people similar to us in this country, but nobody is better than us.
The Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad visited the city of Bahia on Saturday as the last stop of his campaign. He was there to show that he's fully committed to the people, despite the fact that his counterpart Jair Bolsonaro leads the polls in the region. Meanwhile, a convoy in support of Bolsonaro made its way through the streets of Brasilia. Cars were decorated with Brazilian flags and pro-Bolsonaro emblems. But in the city of Sao Paulo, hundreds gathered to protest against the far-right candidate. Protests used the slogan "Ele Now," meaning not him, to drum up support against the former army captain. Earlier, we spoke with Dr. Mauricio Santoro, a Brazilian political scientist and professor at the Rio de Janeiro State University. He explained to us the fear gripping Brazil due to the rise of the far right.
And it became a very difficult moment for us in Brazil. Many people feel that democracy itself is at stake because there is this growing fear about the rise of the far right and what's going to happen with the minorities in this country if they win the presidency of the republic.
Let's take a look at the Social Liberal Party candidate Jair Bolsonaro. He has been in first place in all polls since former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva was prevented from running.
He is a 62-year-old former captain in the army who defends the military dictatorship and considers torture legitimate. He has become notorious for his sexist and homophobic remarks, and he has presented himself as a messiah to save the Brazilian people. Bolsonaro has served 7 terms as a member of the lower house of the Brazilian Congress. His political platform includes a strong security agenda. It includes lowering the age of criminal responsibility to 16 and spending more on the police and intelligence services. He's also in favor of privatizing public companies.
Let's take a look at the Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad.
The Workers' Party candidate entered the race late after the Supreme Court barred Lula from running. But he has already consolidated his position in second place in the polls. Fernando Haddad is an academic, a former mayor of Sao Paulo, and a former minister of education. He helped to found 18 universities, 173 school campuses, and 360 federal institutes. The Workers' Party also established an education policy to give more opportunities for black and indigenous people. Among his proposals are the abolition of the labor reform, a reform on social investment and privatization policies imposed by President Temer. Also a reform of the state system to establish a truth commission to investigate crimes of the dictatorship and the development of a basic food income.
And finally, let's look at the candidate who's been running third in most of the polls, Ciro Gomes.
Ciro Gomes, aged 60, is running with the centre-left Democratic Labour Party. He has worked as a minister in right and left-wing governments. A lawyer, he was the governor of Ceará State and was also a member of parliament. Gomes wants to create a border police unit and 2 million jobs during his first year of government. He also wants to fight corruption and strengthen the public health system. He also wants to make fiscal adjustments if elected and to reform the pension system.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Janeiro, today's election will take place under the shadow of the ongoing military intervention that has gripped the city for months now.
Since February of this year, Rio de Janeiro has been under a military intervention for public safety. This radical measure was approved in Congress with the support of representatives like Jair Bolsonaro. On the streets of Rio, citizens are highly critical of the far-right presidential candidate.
I
believe Mr. Bolsonaro is a fascist. I do not want him to represent me in anything. Not for me, nor for the Brazilian people.
He's a very bad person, a homophobe. I have no nice things to say about him.
Despite presenting himself as a candidate for a new political era, Bolsonaro has been a politician for over 30 years. Out of 170 proposed bills, he's only successfully managed to pass 2. His candidacy is highly divisive for Rio voters.
While nobody is perfect, I disagree with many of his ideologies. I think his ideas are not the best. He has terrible ideas. If he wins, many innocent people will die. Very bad things will happen.
While Bolsonaro has been avoiding debates over a controversial medical recommendation, experts feel that his government will be extremely conservative on social issues and neoliberal in economic matters.
His would be an authoritarian government with economic liberalism. This is the exact scheme Pinochet used in Chile during the 70s. The man in charge of Bolsonaro's economic policies is Paulo Guedes, who went to graduate school in Chicago. His policies would include privatizing Brazil's central bank, the Federal Reserve, Petrobras, and any other public institution.
Staying away from debating his opponents, Bolsonaro continues to lead in the polls. It's likely he will face off against Fernando Haddad, the candidate for the Workers' Party, during a runoff election.
Recently, we spoke with independent journalist Mike Folks. He told us about the mood in Brazil right now.
You can feel the polarization pretty well. The atmosphere is fairly intense. I'd say it's energized because people are really excited one way or another. You know, those supporters for Haddad, the possibility of a return to the left, and also obviously those supporters for Bolsonaro that are really excited about a drastic change for Brazil. There's a very large percent of the population there in the middle that isn't quite sure what to believe. I was interviewing people on the street just this afternoon, and there's a lot of people that are split, but definitely people, I'd say they're nervous, they're energized, and they're looking forward towards Sunday for whatever that's going to mean.
Mike also explained we're looking at a highly likely second round.
Yeah, there's almost no doubt that we're going to see a second round. At this point, Bolsonaro is around 32% in the polls, and Haddad is about 10 points back from him. And then the next candidate after him is Ciro Gomes from the Democratic Labor Party, and he has 10 points. So the leading candidate would have to have over 50% of the valid votes in the election in order to win in the first round. And at this point, it doesn't look like any of the candidates are going to get that. Obviously, Bolsonaro will likely win the first round, and if things go kind of according to plan, unless there are big changes, then Haddad will most likely come in second. And that's what we're going to see in the second round, most likely.
At least 10 people have died in an earthquake that hit Haiti on Saturday night. The magnitude 5.9 earthquake is the strongest to hit the Caribbean nation since the one in 2010, which killed 200,000 people. President Jovenel Moïse has called on citizens to remain calm. Prime Minister Jean-Henri Sion sent condolences to the victims. An unknown number of people have been injured and several buildings were destroyed. Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness has confirmed that the state oil company Petrogen is operating and a review of it is underway. Holness commissioned a panel to review the company after allegations of corruption came to light earlier this year. The energy portfolio under the company falls is now the responsibility of the Office of the Prime Minister. A group of 90 Venezuelan migrants left the Dominican Republic on Saturday under the Venezuelan government's Return to the Homeland plan. This is the first flight under the program to leave the Dominican Republic. Venezuelan Ambassador Ali de Jesus Uzcategui said another group will leave the country in the next few days. He says there are about 30,000 Venezuelans in the country, and many are facing difficulties.
I want to give Venezuelans a message. Don't live up to false dreams. We are going to die in our land. I am a Venezuelan as you all. We left our country to work, to meet our needs. They treat us really bad. I'm coming back because they treat us bad. Wherever we go, we can't get a job. They want to use women and enslave us men. We need to fight for our country.
And on Friday, 96 Venezuelan migrants living in Ecuador returned home thanks to the Return to the Homeland program. This is the 5th flight chartered by the Bolivarian government from Ecuador. Migrants say they have suffered from xenophobia and poor working conditions. They're excited to start over back at home.
They arrived little by little to the Venezuelan embassy in Quito. This new group of migrants were ready to return home, bringing the number of those who have decided to leave Ecuador to nearly 400.
I had a job for a little while. They paid me very little. I was being exploited, working long hours for little pay, so I quit, but they never paid me full my severance. I was having trouble paying the rent, so I decided it would be better to return home.
The situation for us here is very rough. They don't hire us, and when they do, they pay us less than they should. We are exploited.
Before heading back home, the group of migrants, along with the staff from the embassy, paid tribute to Mariscal Antonio José de Sucre at his mausoleum. On the way to the airport, many of them expressed their surprise at the initiative by the Venezuelan government to help migrants to go home.
I thought it was a lie at first. I saw many messages on social media that said this was dangerous, that they destroyed your passport, that you would be abused, so I had many doubts. But still, I went to the embassy. They helped me a lot. They were very nice to me. I'm not being paid to say this. This comes from the heart. I am very grateful.
Once they got to the airport, ready to board their flight, they said goodbye to Ecuador and sent a message of support to their compatriots.
We must continue to build a better future, a better Venezuela. Our country needs us. Venezuela cannot be rebuilt from outside. We must return and lend a helping hand.
This is the 5th flight that has left Ecuador, and authorities have not ruled out the possibility of more flights.
Costa Rica's Legislative Assembly approved the economic reform plan proposed by the government of President Carlos Alvarado. The bill was passed with 35 votes in favor. Meanwhile, demonstrators gathered outside the assembly to reject the bill.
Despite bad weather alerts, which usually prevent people from going out, this time protesters are determined to gather outside the Legislative Assembly no matter what.
The people are completely against this reform, so we stand here, firm in our belief that peaceful protests are their answer. We are a people who believe in democracy, that is facing a stubborn president that insists on damaging our country.
Inside the Assembly, the proposed economic reform is moving forward. Representatives were given 10 minutes to vote as the reform is being rushed through by those who wrote it.
We have come to an agreement with our members that this national strike will remain in force. We will bend the arm of the government, no matter how stubborn they act. They cannot only work for big transnational industries or answer only to the IMF or the World Bank.
Protesters will continue pressuring the government. They recall a similar strike nearly 20 years ago that defeated the privatization of the energy sector.
In the year 2000, we defeated them once, and today we will defeat them again. What's in play here are neoliberal policies that will take us down a path similar to Argentina.
This strike is in its 26th day. Protesters demand a new economic reform that benefits everyone.
They need to listen to alternative viewpoints. Any reform must be just sympathetic, must treat everyone equally and benefit all of us.
Despite numerous complaints about the reform, the government rushed the bill through the Legislative Assembly. Few representatives spoke out against this process.
This economic reform will only be used to benefit companies indebted to public institutions. This has nothing to do with the economic deficit the country is going through.
On Friday, the economic reform was approved. Complaints are being filed in the Constitutional Court, which will take 30 days to provide a ruling. In the meantime, the general strike will continue.
We'll take a short break now. Don't go away. Welcome back. The United States Senate has confirmed Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. This despite facing accusations of sexual assault and a week-long FBI investigation that sharply divided the country. In a narrow vote of 50 to 48, President Donald Trump's nominee was confirmed on Saturday. Protesters inside the Senate building interrupted the voting at least 4 times. Votes remain largely along party lines, with Republican senators supporting the nomination and Democrats opposing it. Kavanaugh was sworn in shortly after the decision for this lifetime appointment.
There is one answer. The events of recent weeks have strained the country's comedy and fanned the flames of partisan discord. But even more critically, our very commitment to the basic principles of fairness and justice is also being tested. Basic principles of fairness and justice being tested right here. A vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh today is also a vote to send a clear message about what the Senate is. This is an institution where the evidence and the facts matter. This is an institution where the evidence and the facts matter.
And as Kavanaugh was being confirmed to the Supreme Court, thousands took to the streets across the country to oppose his appointment. Protesters marching in New York City chanted slogans like, "The system is sexist," and "Impeach," while in Austin, Texas, demonstrators blocked a heavily transited bridge. At least 50 people died after a fuel tanker collided with another truck in the Democratic Republic of Congo. A government official said another 100 people suffered serious burns. The tanker was on its way from the eastern city of Matadi to the capital, Kinshasa. Fatal road accidents occur frequently in the Democratic Republic of Congo due to poor infrastructure and defective vehicles. And just minutes ago, Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad has cast his ballot in Sao Paulo. You're looking at live images outside the polling station where Haddad is speaking to the press. The left-wing candidate is replacing former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, who was banned from running. Haddad has been placed second on most polls, trailing far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro. We come to the end of this news brief. For everything on Brazil's election, you can check out our special website at telesurtv.net/English. Then go to In-Depth and click on the option Brazil Elections, everything you need to know. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.